Gene in the booth. That's all. We have a Dr. Gene in the booth, and we're going to go live here now for week 15, a week like no other. I wonder how long we're going to say that. And also, we got Chris Allen here is going to join in with some start sits. We're going to pepper Dr. Gene with questions. But first, Doc, in as brief way as possible, because we have a lot of specific things to talk about, there were a lot of changes in the COVID protocol for the NFL over the last few days, including some games being postponed. Again, folks, tomorrow we're going to have a second Monday game. It's going to be the Browns and the Raiders. And then we're going to have 2 Tuesday games, Washington and Philadelphia, and the Rams and the Seahawks. What, if anything, Doc, is the bottom line for fantasy football players, for avid football fans to take away from these changes?
I think it very likely means we're not going to have another week like we had this week, where on a daily basis there's 30 to 50 people added to the COVID list. So not that they couldn't be, but the NFL has decided, much like what we're doing in the general public, is to test people with symptoms only. And some folks who are asymptomatic and potentially contagious are going to slip through. Some folks who may have mild enough symptoms that no one picks up on, and the player didn't feel it's not that much different than how I feel on a given normal day, to speak up and potentially be tested. So I think we're going to reach an equilibrium soon by which there's going to be a steady stream of players that move to the COVID list, symptomatic, vaccinated or otherwise. But it's not going to be as many as we saw this week. But this is not going away for the next 4 to 6 weeks. It's probably going to be an issue all the way through the NFL playoffs. I think we're going to continue to see surges in cases depending on the location you're in and the situation with variants for weeks and weeks and weeks. My advice to folks from the beginning of the year, and certainly over the last couple of weeks, has been stay flexible with your rosters. This might not be a situation where, okay, or most of you are probably planning on upside and making sure you have players handcuffed and what sort of upside might be on the free agent wires and things like that. But I would not leave yourselves without an option. Always have some sort of option that you can move in on the last moment, on the last day, because they haven't really changed the enhanced nature of the protocols. Teams that have a number of players that are positive are still going to be subject to some increased testing. And there's one of the paragraphs in the memo was this sort of nebulous, we're going to do some targeted testing where it's not going to be symptomatic players. It's not just going to be unvaccinated players. It's going to be within position groups, and it may be, early in the week. It may be later in the week. It's hard to know. It probably will be earlier in the week. So in those situations, I think you'll know by Monday or Tuesday. But just try to stay as flexible as possible. Hopefully, commissioners over the past couple of years have already taken that into account and have some measure of flexibility where you're able to move players around to inactive and active lists on your own fantasy rosters. But shouldn't see 100 players move to the COVID list anytime soon, just because there's not going to be that many players tested.
Man, I'm just hoping that that's not going to be the case, but no, I understand, Dr. Gene. Well, speaking about updates, can you update us on James Conner? I know we had talked about him slightly on Thursday. If I'm remembering correctly, your notes on him seem like you were more on the doubtful side of questionable. The team seems to think that he's going to be ready to go today. What do you think now?
Yeah, so I feel a lot better about him than I did after his Thursday DNP. The short week with an MRI on Tuesday, it makes you wonder whether or not there was enough symptoms there that, how is he going to recover in time to be effective? And the tone of the reports Friday into overnight on Saturday have been pretty positive. I still think Chase Edmonds is the healthier of the two players. I think the Cardinals over the past 2 months have shown that they're not going to return players until they're ready to play, which means, one, that I think Edmonds is probably ready to take his pre-injury workload, assuming that his conditioning is okay and he feels all right in his first couple of series. But it also probably means that if they're going to allow James Conner to play, that they're not that concerned about him. I do think it's going to be a little bit difficult to project exactly how this is going to work out, but I would lean towards Edmonds getting more snaps and touches. But Connor significantly cut into Edmonds' production in the past, especially around the goal line. So I don't know. We're certainly not going to see what we've seen from Connor over the past 3 weeks with Edmonds returning. But I don't know that we can immediately say, okay, as I thought, that Edmonds is going to get 15 to 18 touches and then maybe all that he can handle today. I don't know that that's the case. So it's become a much more murky situation. I feel more positive about Connor playing than I did on Thursday when I said I didn't think we're going to see much of him at all. But I don't necessarily think I feel any more positive that Connor's going to go back to his 10 to 15 touch, high leverage situation around the goal line role. I think he's going to get some touches, but I don't know that it's going to be quite that many.
Gene, unwittingly, did the NFL clear up the Eagles quarterback situation, at least for fantasy football, for Week 15 by pushing that game back to Tuesday?
They did for me. They allowed us to see that Jalen Hurts is going to be cleared for whatever full practice means through the weekend. That they're allowing him to take more and more of the first team reps, and it looks like he is going to get those extra couple of days of conditioning and recovery to allow him to be the starter. Because I wasn't sure that was going to happen when he was splitting first team reps with Minshew through the middle part of the week. But getting those extra 3 days of recovery time really looks like it's put him in line to be the starter.
So, Dr. Gene, so Jeff Wilson, I don't even think he's on the injury report for this week, but
Correct.
I know that with him being brought back, let's say relatively early, given his offseason injury and the surgery that he had, and then now he had a flare-up during the game, had flare-up during practices. Elijah Mitchell's out, so I know folks are going to be relying on Wilson for the 49ers, to carry the load for them. But, is there a chance that this sort of thing can happen again this week with so many folks needing him?
Yes, I think so. He made it through last week's game against Cincinnati without too much difficulty, but he didn't look super effective either. So, whether or not James Hasty's going to get it, James Hasty. I am so old. Jermichael Hasty gets a little bit more of a role today or not remains to be seen. But I think Wilson is healthy enough that you can assume that he's going to be the lead back as they had planned last week, and hopefully he'll be more effective and won't have any aggravations during the game.
A lot of this stuff actually, thankfully, seems in a week where not very much was clear cut. A lot of injury situations are clear cut. I guess let's just do some house cleaning, Doc. Should anybody be waiting around to see if Lamar Jackson's going to play when they announce inactives?
No, I don't think so. I think what we knew was that even though the team said it wasn't a high ankle sprain, that this wasn't a simple ankle injury. And I specifically avoided the word sprain because you really couldn't tell what was going on. It was pretty clear that it wasn't a simple ankle turn. So it's a little concerning to hear bone bruise. It's reassuring for folks that are hoping to advance this week or have a bye with Jackson on their roster that he's already moving around a little bit better. I don't see them putting him on the field if he's not able to protect himself in the pocket and he's not able to be as dynamic of a rushing threat. Now, if more of that is happening than we suspect, but Adam Schefter essentially said he's got a chance, but it's not going to happen. So if you've got any sort of reasonable morning option, use it. If you're not sure about an afternoon option or a Monday, Tuesday option, you can wait and see what we hear in pregame warmups from Jackson, but I don't even expect him to be out there during pregame warmup. I think we're going to hear pretty close to the time of inactives that he didn't come out and he's going to be inactive. And then hopefully the clarification that we got on his injury means that next week is going to be a nice lead in and he's going to get some practice time and be pretty close to his usual self.
Gotcha. Leonard Fournette, I would assume that you're a bit more positive on him than any of the other running backs we've discussed so far. It sounded like he was just sore more than anything else. Any chance that he'll see a reduced workload today?
He's going to see a reduced workload. I just don't see any chance that we get another week of 80-90% Leonard Fournette, given the fact that he's been a little bit sore already. But I don't, from a touches and carry standpoint, I don't know that we're going to see that much of a decrease. I think you can still reliably expect him to get 15 plus touches, but I don't think he's going to be on the field for 85% of the snaps today. Didn't get full practice. It's been a very effective part of their offense. Ronald Jones is not Leonard Fournette right now, but I think he was already going to take over all of Giovanni Bernard's passing down work, and I think you're going to see him mix in maybe for an extra series or two. I wouldn't downgrade Fournette's expectation in terms of tiers and overall touches necessarily, but this is not going to be a 25 touch game for him.
Another house cleaning one, and we're going to send you on your way pretty soon, Gene, because, man, you picked the wrong year to be an injury expert in the NFL. Anyone waiting around for Adam Thielen tomorrow night?
I don't know why they listed him questionable. He hasn't practiced in 2 weeks. We know he's got a high ankle sprain. I know the Vikings need to win games, but I would be surprised if he's active. If he is, he's going to be out there at less than 100% and trying to make the best of limited and high leverage situations. But I think they listed him questionable just to put on, I'm not really sure why they listed him questionable. I don't give much of the plan. I was surprised about that. So much so that when I wrote the article yesterday morning, I just marked him doubtful and out. And I saw he was listed questionable last night. Like, I'm not changing that. I'm not even writing a blurb about this because I don't expect him to be cleared to play. So I may be wrong about that. He may end up being active, but this is not going to be a double-digit target game with the chances of multiple touchdowns. If it is, y'all can throw tomatoes at me later, but I think he's going to be inactive.
Last one for me, Gene. either of the two Broncos running backs. I mean, Javonte Williams dealing with I forget what's his shoulder or something like that, or I forget.
It is knee, it's just some knee swelling. And it's
knee
not
swelling.
clear whether or not he took a little hit on the knee or whether or not he's got
And then
some
Melvin
chronic
Gordon with
condition.
the thumb.
Thumb and the tip stuff that he's been dealing with. Yeah, I don't think there's any concern with either one of these guys. Vic Fangio has been pretty reassuring. It was a little bit nerve-wracking to see Williams not practicing at all on Thursday, but I think they knew that he was in good condition and they didn't really want to take any chances that he was a little bit more sore than they wanted him to be Friday into Saturday, knowing that they've got a home game. So last week, the split as far as snaps went was right down the middle, but Gordon got quite a few more touches in those situations. And I expect, we're going to see the same split we always did. I don't think either one of them are at much risk going into the game of one of the injuries that they're dealing with being aggravated. But, both of them have been banged up at different times. So see how it goes. But I think that's going to be pretty close to 50-50, at least planned usage distribution.
All right, Gene, one more I'm going to ask you, and then we will send you on your way, on your merry way. Merry. Hopefully everyone's having a good holiday season and enjoying time with everybody. With Pete Carroll saying that Tyler Lockett was symptomatic, even though he was vaccinated, he was symptomatic. Is there any reason for folks to wait? Because this is the new COVID landscape of fantasy football decisions. I only have a Tuesday game. Is there any reason to wait for Tyler Lockett, knowing that Pete Carroll said he was symptomatic?
Short answer is no. The slightly long answer is, given what we know about how the NFL is going to change the threshold of their testing, the threshold that they're using is still significant enough that if somebody is symptomatic, it's hard to think that a PCR DNA test is not going to be is going to become negative sooner than the symptoms resolve. So possible, but unlikely.
All right. What's always likely and more than possible, probable. We're going to say Dr. Gene is probable for week 16 for helping us get to the championships, always handling his job with grace and a great trenchant logic and knowledge. Dr. Gene, enjoy your Sunday.
Thank you. Probable seems fair. I'll go with probable.
Yeah. Aren't we all day to day, like Vin Scully would say? Yeah, Chris. Whew. Well, our job's got more complicated, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Because, wow, and my camera got turned. That's complicating things. So I want to start with, again, this idea of the running back thermometer, because again, it's getting even more complicated this week, and folks are having to make decisions with somewhat incomplete knowledge about the outlook for these 4 games that are coming up on Monday and Tuesday. So let's start, and I cheat and I look through the chat room. What's up, chat room? Thanks everybody for turning out. It's wonderful to spend time with you on Sunday mornings. It's wonderful to see you all spending time with each other. And so I have an idea of the running backs that are on people's minds. So we will continue. Really what we need, Chris, we need one of those visual aids, like the whiteboard where you can take the names up here and then put them, and then I'm going to move him down and put him above him. And it's not precise, but I think we can give folks an idea of our feelings about these players. Let's start with the lead back, in so much that he only had a third of the snaps, but had almost as many carries as the other 2 running backs combined, both running back receptions and the running back touchdown. It's Dante Foreman.
I knew you were going to ask about him. Yeah.
In Pittsburgh, where we'd start with the thermometer. Where are we on Dante Foreman today?
I say lukewarm to warm. I know that Jeremy McNichols, like his touches, like if you just look at the box score and say like, oh yeah, it looks like it's a 3-way committee. Most of his touches came once that game was out of hand, since they were blowing Jacksonville out. So I would say that and this is the term that I just heard Gene use, which I really liked, planned split. Saying like the planned split was more towards Foreman out of the 3. And then once the game was in hand, that was when we saw more Jeremy McNichols. And so if their plan going into the game is that Foreman is going to be the one to play on the base downs, if their plan is for Foreman to be the one to be used once they get into the red zone, assuming they can move their offense against Pittsburgh's defense, which I mean is entirely possible.
Yeah.
I do lean more towards Foreman. That's why I put him more on the lukewarm to warm side of things. Now, once we get into I mean, the different game situations of how the contest can unfold, sure, it might lend itself more towards either of the other two running backs to get involved. But for right now, I think Foreman has enough of a stranglehold on the touches that we want, like the touches within the 10, within the 20-yard line of opposing defenses, that's the guy that you would want to invest in the most. So yeah, I think Foreman's a pretty solid play, like given the rest of the running back landscape for this weekend anyway. As
a Steelers fan, let me say, have you seen the Steelers run defense lately?
It ain't great.
It ain't great. Dante Foreman looks like a pretty good play, and he's fresh. Okay. I'm just going to throw a couple. I'm going to do some team running back. Okay. Green Bay running backs.
Love it. I mean, I think they've got one of the better matchups. A.J. Dillon, particularly, just because it looks
Dillon
like he's
over Jones, right?
Yeah.
Dillon over, have them both, and you can only play one. Dillon over Jones.
Yeah, because if we're already thinking that this is a game that they should win like fairly handily, assuming it's going to be Tyler Huntley under center, couldn't you just see a situation where even if Huntley puts up one of those, let's say like he scrambles around and maybe they put up maybe 2 touchdowns and maybe tack on a field goal here and there from Justin Tucker and they keep the game competitive for 3/4 of the game, Aaron Rodgers should be able to pick apart that defense. I mean, the Baltimore, because it's just, I feel bad for the Ravens. Because for as much as like many of those wins that they've been able to put together, like the overtime wins, like plural overtime wins that they've had to put together, and with Lamar like consistently bringing them back, just to see injury after injury after injury completely ruin their season, it's just kind of tough to see. But no, I think like Rodgers should have a pretty easy time moving the ball. They should be the ones controlling or dictating how the game goes. And with both teams preferring to play slow anyway, it just kind of lends itself more towards an A.J. Dillon type of game for him to be the one to salt away the game, a la like any of the other, like let's say big name running backs that we would typically view as closers. And so that's where I put Dillon in that category as well.
Yeah, I think that Dillon, everything is set up for him in this game. And Jones did get 2 touchdowns last week, but he had less than half the snaps. And like you said, if it's a boa constrictor second half game, which we didn't quite get because the Bears were leading at halftime, this one is really tough on a lot of people's minds. What do we do with our Los Angeles Rams running backs playing on Tuesday?
So it sounds like, and I saw a tweet from Jordan Rodriguez. I love her work, by the way.
Yeah.
It sounded like she had indicated that Michelle, with given like hot hand approach, it sounds like that's what's going to be for their game, is that he's earned enough of the work so far and he's been productive with the touches that he has been given with Darrell Henderson going out, that he should be the one to see the majority of the work. Now, if there winds up being one of those situations where, like, say he fumbles early or something like that, and Henderson starts to take over, okay, fine. But at best, Henderson would be the one to be in more of the pass-catching role, which makes sense anyway, because Henderson's the better pass-catching back out of the two. So, no, I would still lean towards, let's say, 60-40, 70-30, somewhere in there, like towards Michelle. And then assuming like nothing goes wrong, I think that's the plan for them, like moving for coming into this game. And against Seattle's defense, I think this should wind up going the way that we think it's going to go anyway.
Yeah. Remember, Seattle let Davis Mills start 14 for 14 last week.
Yeah.
So, and I would say this, Michelle over Henderson. You can tell me, like, I don't want to belabor it because we have a lot of things to touch on. Michelle over Henderson, if you have them both and you can only play one.
Yeah. That's where I mean.
But Foreman over both Rams running backs. Dillon's the best guy we've talked about so far.
I think so, yeah.
And maybe even Aaron Jones. Just because he's still going to get some high leverage touches. Green Bay's going to probably score a lot of points. Rams should score a lot of points too. That's why I'm ambivalence here. But Dillon and Foreman. So if someone said Foreman or wait around for a Rams running back.
No, I still lean more towards Foreman. I think that's
absolutely. Now a little bit different because they're playing today and they're playing Detroit, the Arizona running backs.
Chase Edmonds for me. It sounded like even when we talked with Gene, I think it was on Thursday, it sounded like Chase Edmonds was more or less like 90% ready to play last week.
Right.
So if he's the one that's coming in, that's the healthier of the two. But they already had I forget if it was like a press conference or something like that, but the coaches in Arizona are already kind of sounding like they put too much of a workload on James Conner as it is.
Yes, they said as much.
Yeah. So if that's already what's out there, if they already put that out into the ether as to how they're feeling about Connor's workload, as admirable as the production as he's put up so far, it just makes sense that they've already lost DeAndre Hopkins. They really need to be able to make sure that, one, they can secure their spot in the playoffs, but two, make sure they have the personnel to get them through the playoffs to the Super Bowl which I also saw a report earlier today saying DeAndre Hopkins could be back for the Super Bowl with his MCL tear. So we'll see if they make it that far. But I think Chase Edmonds gives them the best bet. They shouldn't have to push themselves against Detroit anyway. So why not just give Edmonds the most of the run, like assuming they get to that stage of the game where, I mean, they're 2 scores ahead. There's no chance for Detroit to come back. Just let Edmonds carry the workload and kind of salt the game away.
Yeah, I'm the only running back I'm more excited to play that we've talked about so far is Dylan. Out of all, I mean, roughly, like, again, we need next year, put in the Football Guys budget to get us like the little magnetic boards or something. Yeah. Okay, this one's really hard because the matchup is mwah, but the player looks cooked, and the player is Ezekiel Elliott.
I can't do it. I can't.
I love it. I know. No, that was a perfect, strong, immediate reaction.
Because let's say if Tony Pollard wasn't active, then okay, fine. But if the team is if he's coming back to play in this game, even if he's only going to be playing, let's say, I think his snap share was something around like 25 to 30 snaps like per game anyway. So it's not like he had the largest role, but it's a role enough such that the team is the team is acknowledging the fact that they really don't have that punch on like from a running back perspective. And right. Who was it last week? If Corey Clement is the one that looked like he was the more athletic of the two last week, I mean, it's like, what are we doing here? So I have no faith in this backfield. If anything, the hope is that against the Giants defense, we can see Dak get back on track, like from a passing perspective. And this is just, if I'm going to play any piece of that game, one, it's just only going to be on the Dallas side. And then 2, it would just be maybe one of Amari, CD, maybe Michael Gallup, if you feel so inclined, if you want that sort of like, what the heck flex like type of upside, but that's about it. Like I don't want to try and rely on any of the running game pieces like in this game.
I agree. Elliott's going to have 12 for 40 and maybe 2 catches for 12 yards. He might score 2 or even 3 touchdowns, and he might score 0 touchdowns. The Giants matchup gives him the opportunity to get a lot of short touchdowns, but that's what you're relying on. And I'm going to give you another one, and I'm going to do a spoiler here and say my feeling about this one is also similar to you. Like right away, I'm like, I can't do it. Like I might even be thinking about playing Craig Reynolds over this guy, and that guy is Antonio Gibson.
Yeah. I think that I think the problem that I had going into last week's game is that, and I think I heard Rich Rebar talk about this on one of his shows, was that even through all of the 2 solid like back-to-back weeks where it was J.D. McKissic not being a larger part of the offense, and then in the game where J.D. McKissic was out and Antonio Gibson was essentially like the running back like for the week, it's that Washington was capable of playing from ahead. But we had never really seen a situation where Ron Rivera was comfortable with continuing to use Antonio Gibson in the passing game, like once they fell behind. And we saw that come to fruition against Dallas. It was like once they fell behind, and of course, Antonio Gibson put the ball on the ground a couple of times too. It was Jared Patterson that was working in, and we weren't seeing those targets like going more towards Gibson anymore. So it's like if he's still going to be this game script dependent back, we're already talking about a game where, I mean, their offensive line is still probably going to be decimated with injuries and or like COVID tests. I can't do it with Antonio Gibson right now. Like it's just their team total I thought was in the teens last I checked.
Right.
So it's like why invest in that type of a backfield?
Yeah, as it was before the quarterback stuff, which is not good. And the other thing is Philadelphia's going to run the ball. So it's something, and I don't really know how to quantify this, Chris, but I think something that may be on a week-to-week basis, I think DFS players, and when it comes to setting lineups and start-sit questions, the time of possession battle. And when your defense isn't going to be able to get off the field, or your defense is going to be facing, how many rush attempts are the Eagles going to have on Tuesday? 40?
Yeah.
45?
And how much of the clock is that going to eat up?
Exactly. How many possessions is the Washington offense going to get? Quarterback by Kyle Shermer?
Yeah.
Maybe?
Yeah.
I don't know. Kyle Allen? I don't know. But I know that as it was, Gibson was already in the doghouse because of his fumbles. Like you said, his role was shrinking. Jonathan Williams got the touchdown last week. And it seems like Washington is having a crisis of faith in his ball security. Then you add a horrible outlook for this offense. It makes it really easy to break ties against Gibson. Okay, stepping through these running backs, because this is just the theme. I think as the year's gone on, Chris, we just have more and more ambivalent, ambiguous running backs. And we're ambivalent about these ambiguous outlook running backs. Jeff Wilson. It is Atlanta.
Mhm.
He's probably healthier than he was last week, but you also have Deebo Samuel, who's basically a running back now. I mean, are we going so far with guys like Elliott and Gibson that we would start Jeff Wilson over them?
Yes. And this is more of I have to think about the process that would lead you to playing them.
Right.
Because if you're looking at, I mean, the Giants rush defense, like it's not that bad.
Right.
But and also at the same time, we also have health concerns for Zeke, like so on and so forth. And now with Jeff Wilson, at the very least, the opportunity is going to be there for Jeff Wilson. I think if you were to just like kind of take the name off, look at just like how many touches he's been provided, the efficiency definitely hasn't been there, but the matchups always like also haven't really presented themselves to be the best of matchups like so far. I mean, Cincinnati's rush defense has been fairly decent, even though they wound up losing like Trey Hendrickson in their game in their game last week.
Mm-hmm.
And then, but still, I mean, the rush defenses they played against over the past couple of weeks haven't been great. This week, the Falcons bottom 10 in schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed to running backs. And while Jeff Wilson isn't involved in the passing game, at the very least, I mean, I know Deebo Samuel is Deebo Samuel, and that's fine. But if they wind up getting into a situation where maybe they wind up, I mean, they should be able to move the ball well enough that they're going to find themselves in the red zone quite often. Jeff Wilson could be the one to take a couple of those carries and get into the paint. So while just like 40, 50, 60 yards is most likely, what let's say his median projection is going to look like, he could also wind up with 50 or 60 yards and a touchdown, which could wind up. So it's like the opportunity is there, and the offense we know is going to be moving the ball. I mean, they probably have, if I'm remembering correctly, they have one of the higher team totals like for this weekend anyway. So it's like out of all the other teams that we've discussed so far and the running backs associated with them, I mean, if the team total is there, the offensive efficiency is also going to be there. Jeff Wilson would be a guy that I think it's more defensible than any of the other guys we've talked about so far.
Yeah, well, if you want to nudge to play Wilson, other than the matchup, the Atlanta matchup, I think it is that I saw this, and sometimes stuff just passed the sniff test, right, Chris?
Yeah,
and because there's a lot of hand wringing about, well, Deebo Samuel's not running. Well, he was running more routes last week. He was running more routes, but they're still not really using him to his fullest potential,
right?
And I wonder if they are trying to err on the side of using him judiciously, right?
Sure.
And what I'm getting at is second half, if they can pull away from Atlanta, that's Jeff Wilson time. Or maybe even Brian Hill time. I mean, that's the thing. Maybe even it is Brian Hill who is activated. Okay, the last one, I saved the best for last. And I mean, I would certainly play A.J. Dillon over this guy. Probably Chase Edmonds. And at that point, I'm not sure. I want to put James Robinson in my lineup this week, Chris. Am I just being sentimental because Ding Dong the Witch is dead? Or is there really something there? I feel like when the coaches say, when Darrell Bevell says he's our starter,
yes, and we're going
to use him then.
Yeah, no,
against the Texans, I'm in, baby.
Yeah, because if I know that it seems more in like hindsight to think about it this way, but if we've seen like Rashad Penny and like so many other like running backs that we typically don't think about as being like running back ones wind up really getting past most of like Houston's like defensive front. I mean, heck, if I'm remembering correctly, like let's see, Myles Gaskins, like the last time they played against them, he wound up getting into the paint as well. So it's like almost every single running back has either been efficient or scored a touchdown or just had one of their better yardage days or. So with James Robinson now being the lead back with Carlos Hyde being out, we already have let's say the forward momentum of not having Urban Meyer as a part of their team anymore. And all of that just kind of goes into, I mean, why you should be playing like James Robinson today. I mean, he's one of the guys that, if I'm remembering right, it was maybe in a game or two ago when Urban Meyer wound up benching James Robinson for a fumble. It was Trevor Lawrence was the one that came over and said like, hey, I need him in here in order to bring it. So it's like, if your quarterback wants you in, if your quarterback believes in you being like the starter for this squad on top of the matchup as well, it's just like all this is just, you're playing James Robinson today, 100% for me.
Yeah, I want to go down with James Robinson in my lineup one way or the other. And Urban Meyer, his fingerprints were all over the offense. So there will be changes, and it is a game against the Texans, and there'll probably be a lot of pent up energy from a psychological standpoint. I mean, there's nothing interesting about the Jags and the Texans from a football standpoint, except that it's probably going to determine the order of the top 5 of the draft. That's it, But from a psychological standpoint, it'll be really interesting to see how the Jags play. A couple of the running backs just want to, and this is tough. I mean, but that's why they pay us the big bucks, Chris. That's why we have 279 people watching us right now. It's not quite, and I don't know what to do with him because it's not quite Gibson and Elliott where you're saying I can't go there. But it also, if I get questions like Foreman or this guy, if I get a question like Edmonds or this guy, which is actually one in the chat room that made me want to bring him up, I'm not sure that I'm putting Saquon Barkley in my Week 15 playoff lineup. What about you?
No, I don't think I am either. I thought, if anything, last week he wound up actually coming in and out of the game with the same ankle injury that's been bothering him throughout the last month to 6 weeks. So, while I know he was able to get in mostly limited practices this week, I don't think he wound up missing practice at all. I think he was limited at some point. But either way, I mean, if we're already looking at a depleted wide receiver core, I thought I saw that Sterling Shepard was doubtful with a calf injury. Don't know about the quarterback situation. It's going to be Mike Glennon, but again, that's why it's more or less an unknown at that situation. Dallas's defense, we just saw what they wound up doing last week to Washington. No, just the game environment doesn't set up well for Saquon. His own health should be something that we should take into account as well. So it's just neither running back in that game at all are pieces that I'd be looking to roster in my fantasy playoffs this week. Not at all.
Yeah, well, I find that some of the decisions that I regret. So Cecil likes to bring up the Marcy Rossman rule. There's that long story behind that of going to the dance with someone and then dancing with somebody else. You dance with who brung you.
Yeah.
Saquon Barkley ain't brung you. He ain't brung you this year. He ain't brung you anywhere. So you're not ditching the person you came to the dance with, because Saquon Barkley, his car broke down on the way to the dance. He wasn't even at the dance this year, really. So you're not really violating that rule. And where I find the mistakes I regret are when I keep betting on a trend to reverse. And the trend is Barkley. Okay, you got a garbage time touchdown last week. If you want to go ahead and put players in hoping for garbage time touchdowns, I'm not going to dispel that notion. Okay. All right. But yeah, I'm not eager to play Barkley. And now when you get into Barkley versus Elliott and Barkley over Gibson, then we're like,
it's just pour yourself a drink at that point.
Yeah, exactly. Pour is nice to enjoy the games. Okay, let's touch on some wide receivers really quick that are coming up. And again, folks, and I'm trying to answer while Chris is giving you his insight. I'm trying to answer as many questions as I can in the chat room. And hopefully you're getting Chris's insight on each individual player. But I feel like this is going to be better because I'm seeing the same names coming up, Chris. So let's move to wide receiver. Because we have some new calculus at wide receiver in Miami with Jalen Waddle not playing today. It's a Jets matchup. There's Devontae Parker, Albert Wilson. Albert Wilson is back in fantasy football questions. You gotta love it.
Yeah.
Any of these guys floating your boat this week?
Devontae Parker for sure. I think in the first 4 weeks of the season, he was up to a 22%, 23% target share, somewhere in that range. And then before the injuries befell essentially the rest of the offense, because they lost Will Fuller and then so on and so forth. Even when he came back, I think it was around the week 8 timeframe, he was still at an 18, 19% target share. And then it seemed like they were easing him back in before their bye week, because I think he was down to about 11, 12%, somewhere in there. So with the bye week, loss of Jalen Waddle, they get the Jets matchup. Myles Gaskin should be back, so that should help them continue to move the ball. But there's really nobody else in the receiving core outside of Mike Gesicki that you think that Tua is going to want to lean on, at least from a targets perspective. So sure, there's going to be some deep shots to, let's say, Mac Hollins or Albert Wilson, like you mentioned. And I hope those guys wind up being the ones that help continue those drives and that they continue to be efficient as an offense. But from a, let's say, foundational piece of Miami's offense, to take that type of look at how Miami's going to move the ball, Parker has to be in the lead for the number of touches, maybe right outside of Myles Gaskin. But Dolphins have been top 5, top 6 in pass rate over expectation throughout the entire year with that quick game scheme that they've been using. So I think that Devontae Parker should be the one to benefit out of most of that, if not him or Mike Gesicki.
Yeah, and I think Wilson slots right into that Waddle role of those quick hitters that Tua has been so good on. And it's the Jets, Remember how
Yeah.
Gardner Minshew looked against the Jets? So
exactly.
Who's our favorite out of AJ Green and Christian Kirk with DeAndre Hopkins on the shelf?
I mean, I want to say AJ Green for myself.
Me too. I keep telling people it's sentiment again.
Yeah.
He's taken us there. He hasn't really gotten hurt this year.
Right. And it's just, I want it to be a thing because I'm just so happy to be able to see him continue to be a productive wide receiver. And I heard actually, I heard Robert Mays and Nate Tice, like their show on The Athletic, like kind of go back and forth over the merits of AJ Green getting into the Hall of Fame. I don't know if he's going to make it or not. I think the Hall is very good, even for me. We'll see. Like that may be like a Thursday night conversation, but I think between the two of them, I lean more towards Kirk just because of his role in the slot. I think that's where, if you're going to peg like any sort of, let's say, consistent usage throughout the game, especially against Detroit, for them to be able to move the ball, I think that's where Kirk has the leverage on AJ Green. But if they're going to continue to take the deeper shots like down the field, because that was what his connection with DeAndre Hopkins was, then sure, that lends more. It lends itself more towards AJ Green. But how many of those shots can you really expect them to take in a game that we think they're going to they should win handily? That's where it's just, Kirk for targets, Green for upside. I think that's where I kind of fall.
Right. If I had to pick one, I'd say Green. If you have both and you want to, Green got like 12 targets last week or something like that, almost as many targets as Hopkins. Yeah. And he and Murray have a pretty good connection. But we're really just kind of shrugging our shoulders. A few more shoulder shrug wide receivers. A banged up DJ Moore in Buffalo.
No. I don't want to.
Yeah. No. Well, it's because of the quarterback play. Every time you pick a wide receiver, remember you're putting the quarterback in your lineup too.
Right.
On that note, with Allen Robinson, and I think unless he's activated today, I don't think he's going to get activated from the COVID list. Darnell Mooney against the Vikings tomorrow night.
Yes, I like that matchup for Justin Fields, to be quite honest. I mean, we've seen the Vikings defense, like what was it, just like a couple weeks ago, like while they were able to put a hurting on Ben Roethlisberger throughout, let's say, like a half to three quarters of that game, to see them be able to fight back, hit on some of those, let's say, underneath routes, and then also some of the deeper shots to Chase Claypool. I can see Darnell Mooney essentially being that guy. Like, while I don't think he has the same skill set or skill level like as the Pittsburgh wide receivers, at least they should be able to beat enough of Minnesota's like secondary in order for him to have a good game. And with Justin Fields being mobile, I think he should be able to evade some pressure. Hopefully doesn't continue to stare down his receivers and throw another pick six. But overall, I think that's an excellent game environment for the Chicago passing game. And just for Justin Fields himself to really be able to show off his mobility, his speed, like out of the pocket. So yeah, I really do like that matchup. I'm excited to see it too.
Yeah, what I'm thinking of with Mooney and why I'm inclined to maybe, and again, so here's another thing, right? With Monday and Tuesday games, it's depending on whether your option that you're weighing Mooney against is maybe playing in the afternoon or maybe playing in the game that you may be, well, I guess you're going to play Tampa receivers over him and you're not going to play Saints receivers over him. So tonight's game doesn't really matter. My point is you can get more information. You can get more information, and if you need upside, it's Mooney. Maybe if you need a safe play, it's like Rashad Bateman or someone like that you feel comfortable getting more targets depending on your scoring system. But when Fields hit Damiere Byrd on that hyper accurate throw over the middle, that Byrd was the slant that he was just. And why can't that be Darnell Mooney this week? Why can't that be Darnell Mooney more than once? Like you said, it's the Vikings, and I think that Mooney is one of those guys that can make your week. He might only get one catch for 15 yards, but with Allen Robinson on the shelf, it gives you that chance. This one genuinely, back on the day on old Yeller, the old Football Guys message board back in like the 2000s, Chris. There was I'm gonna bring up shook, and we would say you were shooked. If you get it, you get it. I'm shooked by Devonta Smith playing on Tuesday against Washington.
I am too. Even though I know a lot of folks will probably take a look at the peripherals for that game, like Washington's secondary, like you want to try and pass on them as much as possible. I mean, even Dak, with outside of the interceptions that he threw, I mean, he was able to get off a decent number of passes across the middle, but that's just not the way that Philadelphia plays. I mean, they are a run first team. And if any of their passes, like while Devonta Smith might have like a larger target share, so like I said, overall the peripherals might look great. I mean, they could just as easily continue to move the ball down the field to Dallas Goedert, or I mean, any of the other, like any other. I mean, heck, I mean, Miles Gaskin, or not Miles Gaskin, Miles Sanders,
Right.
that could be the one to catch a couple of passes too. So it's like I'm having too much trouble of a time figuring out what the Philadelphia Eagles want to do on offense to begin with. So it's hard. It's easier for me to look at other wide receivers like outside of Philadelphia and say like, yeah, I'll just try and collect my points from those guys.
I agree. And I think the problem with playing Devonta Smith this week is Hurts might only throw the ball 12 times. And maybe one of those is a 60-yard touchdown, but that's not really the Eagles passing game right now. So I'm probably breaking anything close, like some of these receivers we've been talking about, against Devonta Smith. I'm telling people to play Amon-Ra St. Brown all over the place, Chris. Am I leading them into oblivion?
No, not at all. I mean, he's been one of their, if not their leading target share, like leading receiver in terms of targets. But I think he's picked up 18, 19 over the past couple of weeks. I mean, his role out of the slot, like I know that even going back and thinking about the offseason takes of Amon-Ra could be Jared Goff's Cooper Kupp. Like that might have been, maybe a little bit of a stretch. Maybe next year, like he might be able to get there. But still, I mean, the role is there. Carolina, the Cardinals interior hasn't been like too terribly great. Actually, we just saw Cooper Kupp do a number on them just a week or so ago. So no, I think that the workload should be there, the opportunity should be there, and then also, I mean, with the deficiencies that the Arizona has on defense in that particular area, Amon-Ra could be an excellent play today.
10 catches. And again, the most important thing here is with and I might have been the one putting out there some takes like Amon-Ra St. Brown could have become Jared Goff's Cooper Kupp. But what we saw was, well, you also have DeAndre Swift, who's DeAndre Swift became Jared Goff's Christian McCaffrey or whatever. Yeah. And then TJ Hawkinson, well, he was sometimes Tyler Higbee, he was sometimes Mark Andrews. My point is, with both of those guys out, well, Amon-Ra St. Brown really is the Cooper Kupp, at least in terms of how much of this offense he is shouldering. And it would not shock me at all to see him. I'm calling him the discount Hunter Renfrow at this point.
Hey, I like that. That's a good one.
Where you're almost automatically putting him in the lineup. Certainly in PPR leagues, there are a lot of names that probably would make people rub their eyes and say, really? Yeah, really. Amon-Ra St. Brown could be that guy. Okay, let's touch on some quarterback stuff before we go. Tight end, you're on your own. Throw it against the wall and see what sticks. I don't even know how to guide me. Either for sure to play your tight end, or I don't know. Go ahead and try Adam Troutman this week. If Brevin Jordan's active, try him. I don't know. I mean, we'll see. Okay. First of all, we have a whole class of quarterbacks this week that can add value as runners. They all have three of them have, and this is crazy, right? Three of them have potential negative game scripts, which is actually positive for fantasy because they're going to be playing from behind. One of them has a positive game script, which is negative for fantasy. The four quarterbacks are Tyler Huntley, Justin Fields, Taysom Hill, and Jalen Hurts. Anybody stand out as someone that I'm likely to say yes or likely to say no when I see them in these tough calls at quarterback this week?
Justin Fields for sure. We just talked about him a bit ago. Jalen Hurts, I think my only question about Hurts was just what is the stability like with his ankle. And now with the additional time for him to get healthy, I think he should also be like, I think I'd probably put Hurts just maybe a smidge ahead of Fields because we've seen it from Hurts from a rushing perspective. So it probably Hurts and then Fields. And then the other two, it's like, I mean, if you're stuck, okay, I get it. Huntley, okay, I get it. He was able to at least show out a bit against Cleveland's in a pinch, like coming in out of off reserve last week when Lamar went down. But with a full week of practice, with a full week of teams preparing for like Green Bay preparing against him, your guess is as good as mine as to how good he's going to be, considering we saw a couple of times, staring down Bateman, like while the opportunity might be great for him, but that could turn into a turnover fairly quickly. So like him and Mark Andrews are the only two that I'd be looking to start, especially with Sammy Watkins out. But outside of that, it's just your guess is as good as mine. So yeah, I understand like why folks like might want to start either of those two other guys, but I think it's for me, it's just either Fields or Hurts out of that group.
Yeah, and so Fields, I'm really liking Fields. Huntley and Hill are the big variance plays. We could easily see the backup quarterback come in and look like the backup quarterback against Green Bay. Green Bay could just be merciless against him.
Sure.
But Huntley does have some experience with these furious comebacks, which end up making him a good fantasy play in the end. Taysom Hill against Tampa, again, no starting tackles for the Saints. Taysom Hill could just be embarrassed in this game, right? I mean, this could be, and Sean Payton's not out there. Pete Carmichael's going to be a good play caller. He's been the offensive coordinator since 2009. So I'm not going to make a big deal out of that. But my point is, Taysom Hill could just be embarrassing. But Taysom Hill has also found a way to pull rabbit out of the hat in each of the last 2 games and get a late, meaningless touchdown. Did you see, by the way, Alvin Kamara said, I told his dumb, shut your mouth.
Yeah.
I told him, you slide. Yeah. Anyway, so Taysom Hill had it in there for his fantasy managers. So big variance, right? So out of Huntley, Fields, Hill, and Hurts, I think we agree that Fields is the best out of the 4, clearly.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to say who has the highest chance of coming in under 15 points, that's probably Hill and Huntley. But if you're saying who has the highest chance of coming in over 30 points, that's probably Hill and Huntley, where Hurts is somewhere in between. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I think that's where that's at, because with I'll just say it's the garbage time touchdown, like for Taysom, it's just the more folks will talk themselves into the matchup for the Saints going up against the Bucks, because how do you beat the Bucks? Like, how have teams tried to beat the Bucks? And it's in a way that doesn't play to Hill's strength. It's just they pass, but that's not his thing. But at the same time, can you see him just ripping off, let's say, a deep shot to Lil Jordan Humphrey or something like that? It's entirely in the range of or wind up getting past the defensive front of the Bucks and he'll run for 30, 40, 50 yards or something like that. So it's like that volatility puts him in that category to score 30 on any given play, considering he scored 27 after throwing for 4 touchdowns not just a few weeks ago. So all of that, I think, is well in play. I think he has the highest ceiling, but it's just with the way that you attack the Bucks, it puts his floor just at, I don't know, 2, 3. I mean, he'll always have like that rushing upside where he'll probably have like 40, 50 yards rushing, but it's just where the turnover is going to happen, or when will they happen if they do it all. And if he winds up getting injured again, because I thought he actually wound up hitting his hand or his finger or something like that in the game against the Jets, if he re-aggravates that, will they flip things over to Simeon? That's just the things I'm going through my mind when thinking about that matchup.
I know. Right. It's like Taysom Hill wasn't supposed to be a good fantasy play the last 2 weeks, and somehow he was. And that induces you to play him this week, and that's whenever the fantasy gods put the banana in the tailpipe, right? I mean, this is totally unscientific, but that's a vibe about Taysom Hill, because like you said, he could get banged up, and I just really feel like Tampa could just turn him into mincemeat, where like it's kind of like Ben Roethlisberger against Minnesota, although again, what did Roethlisberger do in the second half?
Yeah.
But you're like, throw in the towel, please. Okay. One last player before we go, just because I forgot to mention him. And I guess part of the reason I forgot to mention him is I'm not opting for this guy in almost any start-sit question. I did just do one where I said I would probably play him over Antonio Gibson. I'm getting the stink coming off of Antonio Gibson right now for fantasy. It's just like, I got to hold my nose if I'm going to play him. So I would even play him over Rashad Penny. Is there a fascination with Rashad Penny this week, or is it really only if you really don't like your other option, like I was saying with Gibson?
I think if you really don't like your other option, I think starting Penny over Gibson does make some sense, because there's no game script dependency with Penny. It's not like I don't see them really turning to, let's say, like DJ Dallas if they wind up falling behind against the Rams. And I think the one note that I remember Matt Waldman mentioning on the Thursday night show was that it's not just is Penny efficient as a runner, but also how the whole offense moves around him, with D. Eskridge being a good blocker and all that. So it's like if the entire offense can also continue to help him out with Eskridge, with any of the other, with the tight ends, and also that opening up those lanes for him, assuming all that still comes into play, then yes, I still think that's possible. Jalen Ramsey's still supposed to be out for this game as well. So it's like, I can see Penny at least having at least not the game against Houston, absolutely not, but at the very least 60 yards and a touchdown. I think that's well within the range of outcomes for him. So I think I do still like Penny this week.
That Houston thing complicates things, right? Because it could just be a Fugazi because, well, it was the Texans. We could find that out real quickly when he has like 10 yards on his first 8 carries. We'll see. On Tuesday football. Now, closest before I send everyone off into their Sunday, including us, Chris, I'm going to talk on what's close to your heart because we haven't talked about any Bengals at all.
Yeah.
And the Bengals have now evolved or devolved to playing their worst game and best game in the same game. They're just doing it all in one game now. The Chargers game, right? The 49ers game. They're doing it all in one game. So you've got your finger on the pulse of the Bengals more than any other team. Are you more likely to tell people to play your bank? If it's close with Mixon, if it's close with Higgins, if it's close with Burrow, play these guys. Or this team is teetering. They're playing Denver. It's basically a playoff game. I think you have to treat this as a playoff game because if either team whatever team loses this game is going to have a long shot at the playoffs. And the team that wins the game should feel really good about their chances of getting in if they can keep up the level of play they had today. So are you cheering on the Bengals into people's lineups today, or are you feeling more cautious?
No, I am. And I think especially after last night's game, I think that bumps the Colts up the ranks, like where Cincinnati had more of a shot, like had they lost. So yeah, these are must-win games for both teams, like for essentially the rest of the way out. But yeah, I think with all the notes like coming out of last week's game, Zach Taylor talking about the fact that he even noted that their lack of aggression on early downs and even throughout overtime, it was just okay, it put the team in a hole on top of the special teams turnovers. And that's really been the story for the past couple of weeks. It's just those fluky turnovers. What was it, 2 weeks ago, in the Chargers game, where it's just like the mix and fumble 6.
Yeah.
And then this past week with the 2 muffed
punts.
Yeah, which forced them to put Tyler Boyd back as the punt returner, which I think he's still going to mix in as the punt returner this week. I don't think they made a final call as to whose job that's going to be. But overall, I think the team is figuring itself out still. But I'm not as mad at the offense or the defense, really, to be quite honest. Now, I do have a concern about Riley Reiff being out today. We'll see what happens with Trey Hendrickson. I don't think he's supposed to play, but I should take that back. I think he'll play, but his level of, how much he plays with his back spasms they had like last week, that's also going to be a concern. But I think the biggest thing is, can the team, from an offensive perspective, continue to put their pedal to the gas and put their foot to the gas and continue to be aggressive on offense throughout the entire game? I think that's the biggest problem that they've had so far. And with this matchup, even though the Broncos typically like to slow things down with their running game, I do think that Joe Burrow can come out and have a good day against the aggressive front of Denver. But I still think that if you have any of your Bengals, I'm starting all of them. You got Chase and Higgins, you're starting anyway. Honestly, I'd throw in Uzomah. I'd throw in Tyler Boyd. I mean, I think all of those guys should have at least a decent shot at returning value on today's game.
Yeah, and it makes me sad to say this, going back to your AJ Green Hall of Fame conversation, because that is a worthy conversation. It's unfortunately, and it makes me sad to say this, the fact that he played his whole career in Cincinnati probably hurts his case.
I think he does. Unless he needs that second act in Arizona.
Yeah.
Maybe like 1 to 2 more years.
Win a Super Bowl.
Yes, win a Super Bowl, 1 to 2 good years in Arizona, like a la like Larry Fitzgerald, just kind of like playing it out, like just having 800, 900 yards or something like that, like for the next couple of seasons. I think he gets in, but he needs that to happen in order to do it.
I'm rooting for it. Certainly a player who's never gotten the due, but hopefully your fantasy team gets the due it deserves. You made it to the playoffs, and whatever decision you make, it's about surviving and advancing. Dr. Gene was here to help you with that. Chris Allen, myself, Sigmund Bloom. We're going to be back here next Sunday morning to help those of you that survive or hang out with those of you who don't survive. And it's Sunday morning. It's a wonderful ritual to spend this time with you folks because you're so classy.